The prairie fire had swallowed the world whole, leaving only ash and the bones of what once stood proud. Elias walked through the smoldering silence, his boots crunching on cinders that had been a family's home. He was a man who spoke to cattle more than people, a solitary soul carved from wind and drought. The charred timbers of the homestead sagged like broken ribs, but something glinted beneath the fallen hearthstone. He knelt and pulled a small tin box from the ashes, still warm from the inferno's hungry breath. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, untouched by the flame's cruelty. The handwriting was delicate, the ink slightly smudged, as if tears had once fallen on the hopeful words. He read the first line by the dying light. "My name is Clara, and I dream in limestone." She wrote of a sanctuary on the ridge, a tiny chapel built of stone to watch the mustangs run. Her words painted a world of wildflowers and morning light, a place where broken souls could find peace. Elias learned from the letters that she was 17, orphaned, and living with an uncle who drank heavily. She had no one to share her dreams with, so she poured them onto paper and hid them away. The last letter was dated the day before the fire, and it spoke of a hope that tomorrow would come. Elias sat among the ruins until the stars emerged, clutching the letters like a sacred and fragile relic. He had never met this girl, yet her voice reached across the void and seized his weary heart. At dawn, he walked to the ridge she described, where the limestone jutted from the earth like ancient altars. He saw the valley below, the wild horses grazing, and he understood exactly what she had seen. With no plan and no audience, he lifted the first jagged stone and carried it to the chosen spot. That day he laid the cornerstone, a rough block of limestone that would anchor her dream to reality. He returned every morning before the sun, hauling stone after stone up the steep and unforgiving slope. His hands bled and calloused over, but the pain felt like a prayer, a penance for unknown sins. The letters remained in his saddlebag, and each night he read a passage aloud to the empty air. Summer scorched his back, autumn chilled his bones, but still he built, stone by silent stone. He mixed mortar from creek sand and lime, learning the craft from a tattered book in town. The walls rose slowly, a small rectangle with a single arched window facing east toward the sunrise. People in the settlement whispered that Elias had gone mad, building a chapel for a ghost. He ignored them, for the letters had become his scripture, and Clara's dream his only purpose. One evening, as he set a keystone, he caught the faint scent of lavender on the wind. He turned, and for a heartbeat, he saw a slender figure in a pale dress standing among the pines. She vanished like mist, but he knew her face from the description she had written of herself. Clara had written that she had auburn hair and a freckle beside her left eye, like a tiny star. From that night forward, Elias felt a presence watching him work, a gentle and patient companionship. He began to speak to her as he mortared stones, telling her about his lonely life before the fire. He confessed that he had once been a father, but smallpox had taken his wife and infant daughter. He had buried them under a cottonwood and never allowed himself to love anything fragile again. But these letters had cracked his heart open, and rebuilding her sanctuary was rebuilding his own soul. Winter brought snow that covered the half-built walls, and Elias sheltered in a canvas tent nearby. He kept a small fire burning and read Clara's letters aloud, his breath fogging in the frozen air. On the solstice night, the ghost appeared fully, sitting across the fire with a sad and grateful smile. She did not speak, but she touched the letters in his hand, and warmth spread through his chest. Elias wept without shame, for he understood that grief could be transformed into a bridge, not a grave. When spring thawed the ground, he worked with renewed vigor, the walls now reaching toward heaven. He carved a small alcove and placed the tin box inside, sealing it behind a limestone face forever. The final stone was the lintel above the doorway, a massive slab he had saved for a year. On the morning he lifted it into place, the wild horses gathered below the ridge as if summoned. He pushed the stone home with a grunt, and the sanctuary was complete, a monument to a dream. Clara stood in the doorway, more real than ever, and this time she spoke with a voice like wind. She thanked him for hearing her whispers across the void and for giving her soul a home. She said that love does not require a lifetime, only a willing heart and hands that refuse to forget. Then she reached out and touched his weathered cheek, and the touch was as solid as sunrise. In that moment, Elias felt his lost wife and daughter forgive him for his years of silence. He felt Clara's spirit ascend, not to vanish, but to become part of the stone and sky. She faded like morning stars, leaving behind a chapel filled with golden light and endless peace. Elias knelt at the stone altar he had built and prayed for the first time in 20 years. The sanctuary became a place where travelers would find rest, and mustangs would graze unafraid nearby. Elias lived in a small cabin at the ridge's base, visiting the chapel every dawn and dusk. He planted lavender around the walls, and it bloomed with a fragrance that attracted butterflies and hummingbirds. The letters remained sealed in their alcove, but he had memorized every word and recited them daily. Years later, a young couple seeking a new life stopped at the chapel and asked Elias its story. He told them about Clara, the fire, the letters, and the year he spent hauling limestone alone. The woman wept, for she too had lost someone, and the chapel gave her a reason to hope. The couple stayed in the valley, building a ranch, and their children played among the lavender bushes. Elias grew old, his hands gnarled, but every stone he had laid still held firm and true. On the anniversary of the chapel's completion, he felt a familiar presence beside him in the doorway. Clara's spirit returned, unchanged, and she took his hand, leading him to the ridge's edge to watch. The wild stallion that had never been tamed bowed his head, and Elias understood the time had come. He turned to Clara, and she nodded, her smile promising that all the love he had given would return. Elias lay down on the stone floor of the sanctuary, his heart full, his breath slowing peacefully. At dawn, the young couple found him, a serene expression on his weathered face, his hands folded. They buried him beside the chapel under a limestone marker that read, "He rebuilt a dream with stone." The wild horses stood vigil on the ridge, and the lavender released its strongest fragrance that day. Clara's spirit never appeared again, but visitors often felt a dual presence, a rancher and a girl. They said the chapel healed their grief, that the stones themselves hummed with a love beyond death. The letters remained hidden, but their words had already reshaped a corner of the wild frontier. So ends the legend of the silent rancher who found a girl's letters in the ashes. He rebuilt her world with limestone and devotion, proving that true foundations never ever crumble. Thank you for witnessing this timeless tale of love and stone from West Old Stories Official today. If this story moved your heart, please subscribe to West Old Stories Official and like this video. Share your thoughts in the comments below and tell us what sanctuary you would build for love.